Thank you for listening to Mobility Redefined, brought to you by Modaxo. For more insights and information, please visit mobilityredefined.com. That is mobilityredefined.com. Welcome to the Mobility Redefined podcast. My name is Dr. Kaan Yildizgöz, and today I am honored to be joined by Joost Vantomme, CEO of ERTICO ITS Europe. Joost has been a key figure in shaping the intelligent transport systems landscape across Europe, and we will be discussing his career today, the outcomes from the recent ITS World Congress, as well as exciting developments in areas like autonomous mobility, artificial intelligence, and other topics. Welcome, Joost.
Thank you, Kaan. Thank you for having me, and I look forward to this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Joost. And Joost, you have had a remarkable career in the mobility and intelligent transport system space. Could you share a bit about your journey and what led you to become the CEO of ERTICO ITS Europe?
Thank you, Kaan. I will try to be brief, although we can talk about this for a day. I started as a lawyer, actually, a lawyer in a law firm, and then afterwards I went to telecommunications industry, the whole, I would say, liberalization, privatization of that sector in Europe and major incumbent operators. I did more or less the same exercise for the postal and logistics industry, who was also undergoing a large transformation, e-commerce, etc., with a lot of regulatory work, so policy work and negotiations with governmental authorities and the European Commission at that time. That brought me to the European consultancy sector, where I was one of the directors in a major American consultancy firms, fairly large here in Brussels, on European lobbying, European advocacy for a number of sectors. And then I was asked by the minister to join his cabinet, actually to do legislative work and negotiations at the government level here in Belgium, the Ministry of Economy, and a lot of negotiations also with the European Commission on all files. And that brought me actually in the whole landscape of European affairs, European association work, I would say lobbying and representation, advocacy, but also setting up programs for partners, for twinning programs, business development and regulatory development. And I did this then for 6 years in the European automotive sector with ACEA, so ACEA, which is the European Association of the OEMs, of the vehicle manufacturers in Europe. We got 15 of them, large companies, obviously, and I did their smart mobility. For 5 years is actually putting this on the agenda next to many other topics like the CO2 topic or the safety topic. I was in charge for all that has to do with connected driving, automated driving, ITS, so intelligent transport systems, data, etc. And after that 5 years, I was asked to position myself as chief executive of ERTICO. After a couple of interviews and selection rounds, I was indeed selected among many others to become the CEO of ERTICO in the 1st of January 2022. So this is my third year. And at the same time, I was also, and I'm still active in the MaaS Alliance, which is a global world alliance for mobility as a service. And I'm very happy to be vice president there, a member of the board.
It's a great career, Joost, and we are very happy that you are leading the ITS Europe now, because we see a lot of excellent developments that are being led by ITS Europe. And can you share with us organization's current vision and your strategic priorities as a CEO for the coming years?
So first, ERTICO ITS Europe, the name says it. ERTICO is actually European Road Telematics and Implementation and Coordination Organization. If you ask me that twice, I will not know it anymore. It's a very long acronym, but it's actually incepted by the European Commission in 1991 with Jacques Delors, who was then the president of the European Commission at the time. It's actually more than 32 years ago, where the Commission said we need to have an engine, a vehicle, an organization dealing with innovation in transport and mobility. And that was exactly the role of ERTICO at that time. Since then, we've been evolved from 16 partners to more than 120 partners today, so members of ERTICO. We are a public-private organization, so I'm not a private business and I'm not a government. I'm a bit in between, very much in sync with European institutions, obviously, as well. And we provide innovation through transport and mobility. That might sound a bit vague, but concretely what we do is a lot of European funded projects. So we get European budgets through competitive bidding, and we apply this for the road sector and others on the innovation and transport. This can be about data sharing, connectivity, automation, mobility as a service, urban mobility, and all these things that we do across Europe. So it's multi-member states, multi-country, multi-city, etc. So that's one important area. The second that we do is thought leadership and advocacy. So pleading our case of ITS in this digitized environment, but also automation and also explaining to the user what it is and what it is not. So that's the whole, I would say, more academic approach and advocacy and lobbying our case. The third big pillar is the ITS congresses. So ITS Congress is a brand name of ERTICO. Since 30 years, we do that, these congresses. There are world congresses and there is a European Congress cycle. For example, we just finalized our 30th ITS World Congress, so 3-0 in Dubai, because ERTICO is Middle East and Africa as well, next to Europe. So we are EMEA. And for the first time, we did it actually in the Middle East. So we're very pleased to have that congress. The next one will be a European Congress. We got one in Lisbon, the last one. Now it will be in Seville in Spain. And then afterwards in Istanbul in Turkey. And then afterwards we have again the World Congress. It's a cycle. And we do it in sync with the colleagues of ITS America. So my brothers and sisters there, and ITS Asia Pacific. So the world of ITS is being divided in 3 big segments. The EMEA one, which I'm heading with my team, the Americas and the Asia Pacific. So that's how we work together in a very intensive way to glue the system together. And we also have national ITS associations, quite a lot, and very big ones, and depends from country to country with whom we work very well. Obviously, if one talks about transport and mobility, it's a very vast domain. It's getting more and more horizontal. It used to talk about cars and about vehicles, about roads, about traffic lights, about public transport and waterborne and airlines. Today, it's multimodal. It's definitely the European agenda, but not only Europe. I see similar moves in other countries. Middle East is now going through that as well. I see it in the US, in Canada, even Australia and New Zealand. So they all talk about multimodality. It's getting the passenger, but also the goods, the freight from point A to point B in a way that is the most efficient, the less emitting, the less polluting, and the less cost, of course, for that. So it's a kind of mobility as a service and transport as a service for people and for goods. And we believe that ITS, so the digital component and the automation component, can play an important role. We do that for a number of things, and we have selected the key focus areas, as that was one of your questions, Kaan. We cannot do everything, of course. Who are we to do that? But we selected today the 4 focus areas. One is on CCAM, so connected, cooperative, and automated mobility. That's all about connected cars, connectivity with infrastructure, with the road infrastructure, with digital twins of the road infrastructure, traffic signs, a better throughput of traffic. It's also about connected and automated driving, so vehicles that are connected with each other, but also cooperative, so CITS, for example, cooperative ITS services, and automation. This can be vehicles, but can also be drones. Why not? Air mobility. So the automation agenda is a big one and a competitive one here in Europe. So that's one big, I would say, area, CCAM, with a lot of, I would say, regulatory oversight from the European institutions. The second is on urban mobility. Urban mobility is definitely a big topic here in Europe, and not only in Europe, also outside, where I see the population density is really higher and higher in cities. They're getting overcrowded. There is a fight for space, literally for space. So everybody claims the road. So we need to respace cities. We need to rethink about the efficient use of space. And we do that through intelligent access systems for vehicles, for bikes, for active mobility, for walking, but also for drones, for example, air mobility, and the public transport, of course, as well. So that's the use of space. The second thing we see in cities is the call for more, I would say, the 15-minute city, as we say, in a way that is less polluting, more climate friendly and air quality friendly. So there is a component of sustainability, which is a big one in more and more cities. And for that, we are co-shaping that agenda also with the European Commission, at least for the European Union part, and countries associated to that. And it's called European Sustainable Urban Mobility Plans, so that every bigger city has the obligation to have a sustainable urban mobility plan with indicators. And definitely digital components are important, data sharing as well. So the whole urban mobility is important, multimodal. The third thing is everything has to do with data, AI. Obviously, that's not only a buzzword, but it's reality today. We are managing the European mobility data space with some others in the consortium. We're setting up, I would say, the whole architecture and data brokerage across companies with public institutions as well. And this can be data for public use, such as PTO data from the public transport operators, or data from private shared vehicles, shared bikes, electrification, charging stations, for example. All this is embedded in the European ITS directive and others, and we are actually making this happen in Europe with partners. So data and AI obviously is needed there in some of the use cases. Finally, so I talked about CCAM, about urban mobility, about data AI. The final segment is transport and logistics, or for logistics. So it's a whole segment of freight transport where we see a lot of facilitation by digital and automation. So the digital component in the freight, such as the EFTI, which is a European regulation on freight transport, data sharing, but also on automation, automated driving. This can be with trucks, buses as well, but trucks in the mining business, they use it, but also in other segments where we see more and more shuttles to move goods as well next to people. So that's the whole segment of freight logistics next to people move that we do. So this is in a very short nutshell, the 4 focus areas. We see looking forward now to the new agendas. One example is resilience is an important one. You see the new European Commission starting next year. Resilience is definitely on the forefront of Mrs. von der Leyen's agenda. Resilience in terms of climate resilience. So when the public infrastructure gets hit by climate changes, unfortunate situations that bridges, tunnels, but also rail infrastructure gets broken, we believe that ITS can play a role in terms of predictability of these things and the digital component. So that is something on the physical side of the equation, I would say, but also the digital resilience. It's about the digitization of this society with a capital S. If you don't have an app, you don't exist anymore, if you want it or not, but that's becoming reality. And this will also be valid for mobility. We see it more and more. And if there would be a problem of cyber trust and cyber resilience, that's why resilience is not only the physical infrastructure, but definitely the digital component as well. And we all need to educate our users of that and society in general on using these digital tools.
Thank you, Joost, for sharing this comprehensive working agenda of ERTICO ITS Europe. And then maybe let's go into the details of some of these agenda topics, which might be very interesting for our listeners. Elon Musk once said, "The future is now." It feels especially true in autonomous mobility. And how do you see this technology integrating into our daily lives and for the next 10 years in our cities?
That's a question I often get in big conferences. What's the killer application, the killer use case for automated driving? First, automation is an evolution path. There are a lot of things that started with your private car or with technology features that allow you to have a bit of automated feeling. Automatic cruise control, for example, where the car is slowing down or accelerating in function of your neighbors in the street, I would say. That's the first steps. We call it ADAS, helping systems, assistance systems for that. But now we go more into automated and autonomous driving, which is we call it level 3 and 4 and 5, so the higher levels of automation, where basically you are driven and you don't drive anymore. You're being driven by a vehicle, by a machine. Yeah? This can be vehicles on 4 wheels, but can also be in the future air mobility devices, for example. So what we see in terms of evolution is that, at least in Europe, most of the use cases we see is now more in the public transport segment. So the shuttles, the bots, the people movers. We see a lot of public operators in the rail sector, for example, or bus operators are going into that segment. They were not present in that segment in the past. So they're doing this, that's the shared mobility approach through shuttles, smaller buses that drive more or less autonomously. First use cases are to be seen in airports, where we move people from one terminal to another. Other mover instances, we see it in shopping malls, shopping centers, airports, where you can park your car and then you get moved to the right destination. So that's one thing we see in the so-called common use of a public transport system. So more than you alone in your car, it will be with others. The second use we see coming over from the US basically is the robot taxi. That's what we see in California, of course, in a fully licensed model there, remunerated. That's today Waymo and Cruise are 2 examples of companies very much experienced in this. And we see them coming over in Europe. More and more appetite to start robot taxis, or actually self-driving taxis, either from remotely activated, so a remote driver, or no driver at all.
It was also interesting to see these robotaxis in Dubai and Abu Dhabi when we were together at ITS World Congress last month.
Yes, indeed. And we have a very detailed discussion on that with the European Commission to the licensing model of these things. This is quite complicated because you don't allow these new instruments, I would say, just like that in the middle of the traffic. There is a whole validation of safety scenarios. There's a whole overview on safety for the vehicle. And also, you need to change the traffic laws. Traffic rules are not yet, in each country, are not yet allowing these type of automated vehicles. So we see that also. Another segment we see is valet parking. So automated valet parking. So a self-parking car, something very convenient because you can better use the space in the parking lots. You don't need all these space, of course, because it's self-parking boxes next to each other. Fully automated. You can even have charging of your car while you're waiting there or while the car is waiting for you. So it's space optimization. That needs, of course, a whole discussion with the communication technology operators, with the physical infrastructure. You need to respace a parking lot or reorganize. The same for shuttles. We need some dedicated tracks for that in some areas. So all this is getting a bit more traction now, literally traction in Europe. And some countries are in favor, so more advanced than others.
When we talk about autonomous mobility, we are also talking, especially in some cities, about the urban air mobility. Exactly. You also touch this topic as part of your working agenda. Urban air mobility has the potential to really change the city transport. Could you provide an overview of how ERTICO is involved in the sector and what future might look like? Maybe giving some examples from cities who are already seriously working on this topic.
Yeah. Thank you. Excellent question. Actually, I'm very proud to be able to voice some of our work on that. 2 weeks ago, in the end of September, we got this ITS World Congress. We have launched a new platform in ERTICO. It's called the IDI platform. Basically, it's ITS for the drone area, for the air mobility, advanced air mobility. We believe that drones and eVTOLs, but in this case, drones can be one key element of mobility and transport. It's not only about cars on the roads, about bicycles and about public transport, but definitely also something that can be in the air. And we see that already the first use cases in logistics. So drones are being used in vertiports in Europe, in main cities like in Hamburg is one of them, but also in others for moving goods from point A to point B. This can be done for postal operations, for the postal network and parcel delivery, hub-to-hub operations. Also, we have delivery of food in certain areas where it's not easy to get to. Food, drugs, medicines for some areas. So that is definitely important. We also see a lot of use cases in the road inspection segment and buildings inspection, where actually drones allow very granular view and geopositioning of the problems even in the buildings, on top of the buildings and next to the buildings. The same for tunnels, bridges, they are being inspected by drones more and more. So that's quite a productivity gain. And we will also see it for movement of goods on the street, above the streets in some areas. We also see it for moving people. That's a bit further away now in timeline. But air taxis, robot air taxis, if I can say so, will see the light. That's clear. We see it already, the first attempts in Dubai, where we have been, and also in Abu Dhabi and other cities and countries in the JCC. And we know in Europe there is a lot of appetite to invest in that. Our goal of ERTICO is bringing the stakeholders together, as we do for other areas, to see what can we learn from the road transport segment. What can we learn from connected mobility, from automation, from traffic management, optimization of space and usage. How can we transpose that into the air mobility? And more especially in cities environments, where a lot of cities are asking questions on drones, and people also, for space management, for privacy, data protection issues. And so there is also a whole agenda that is now being put together for the drone segment and mobility in cities. We want to bring all these people together to see where can digital components play a part, our ERTICO DNA, which is digital innovation and automation and connectivity. And we believe there is good appetite for that. We have some cities who are really interested, airports as well, interested in going into that segment. And we also have good cooperation with the European Commission and DG Move, for example, with EASA, so the safety agency in Europe, aviation. Yeah, there is good traction on that brand new platform, I have to say. Yeah.
And Joost, you are also vice president of MaaS Alliance,
Yes.
as you mentioned also in your introduction. And mobility as a service, MaaS, is a topic that's being discussed more than 10 years in different parts of the world, especially countries, cities from Scandinavia. At the beginning, they were leading this movement, and we saw different examples there. And how do you see the future of mobility as a service?
I know it has been seen as the killer application and as the super use case to move people and goods from point A to point B in a very multimodal way, with one app bringing you from point A to point B. It is not happening as fast as we thought and as fast as had been promised. You know, the Gartner cycle, things get moved very quickly, but then afterwards, we're just still waiting on the killer application of that. This has to do with a number of reasons. One of the reasons that it does not take up that quickly is the lack of open APIs, so open application program interfaces. So each of the transport providers, mobility providers, should actually have an open system, so that he opens his or her system to sometimes to competitors as well, because the more competition you have, the more that the cake is growing. So there is place for everybody. And that we don't see yet too much. And that's something we plead for with the MaaS Alliance, a kind of open mobility ecosystem where we have access, for example, a shared car service or a shared transport service has access to timetables of the public transport operators, have access to the tickets and the booking systems so that you can provide a single ticketing, booking, and payment system. So in one go, you can actually have the whole flow from point A to point B through point AX, for example. You take your bike, you go to the train, then you take a tram, bus, and then maybe a robot taxi in the future, and maybe a drone will bring you somewhere as well. And then at the end, you have to walk to the final destination. So all this should be a bit more integrated seamlessly. Easier said than done. Even within the rail sector, we don't have it yet today, the full single ticket for one rail in Europe. And that has to do with all kinds of reasons, very justified. So open APIs, open, getting away from the silos in transport providers is key. The second reason is the data sharing that is needed. So once these things are open to each other, you need to have access to each other's data and data sets and also make it interoperable. It's easy to have access to the train timetable, but if you cannot resell the ticket or bundle that ticket into your own application, your user still has to go to the public transport operator to buy a ticket. The same for the airlines, the same for others. So the single experience of the real single market in Europe, the free movement of the capital, people, and investments and services is not yet there for the full mobility cycle. And we also need to have examples for that. In order for people to make it happen, you need maybe examples from the public segment, the public transport operator. If they could integrate private operators into their system, into their offer with ticketing and payment, maybe there would be a bit quicker traction on that. So there is still a lot of questions we have now. The good news is that the MaaS Alliance is working on that with all these stakeholders to have an open API system, but also mobility roaming. It's a bit like telecoms roaming. You go from one operator to the other and you do not even know it. It would be a bit the same, although you would know that you're not in a tram or bus, you're something else. But that we have a kind of single sign-on also and a single roaming. And I still believe in that. It will come. It needs a bit of time also from the regulatory agenda. But that's why we are working hard with the MaaS Alliance, the public and the private actors, to make it happen. Yeah.
I think the mobility roaming terminology is very good here. Yeah. And at the end, the objective is to replace the need of using individual car usage. So that's the main philosophy for MaaS systems. And let's see what kind of developments we will see in the next years about mobility as a service. It will be a very interesting journey, I'm sure. And when we talk about the cars, when we are talking about, let's say, mobility as a service, one important element what we can talk is the traffic management, certainly. Because this morning I was looking at some figures, and what I saw is that in the world there are around 1 billion cars. And also the urbanization is increasing. And we are expecting in year 2030 that 70% of the world population will be living in urban areas. That's having an immediate result that the traffic congestion can be expected to increase. And effective traffic management here, supported by technology, is crucial to reduce congestion and improving the urban mobility. What innovations, Joost, are we seeing in traffic management, and how are these helping cities to be more efficient for the future?
We see first the providers of services and equipment on the streets. Literally, the hardware that you see, traffic lights, loops in the street, they're being, I won't say replaced, but they're being helped by digital twins and by digitalization of flow. So these instruments, they can capture the outside environment. They can capture the throughput of traffic. How dense is the traffic? Also, some cities have tolling systems or have access regulatory systems, UVARs, urban vehicle access regulations. It would be nice to know in advance what are these regulations, so in the digital format, and also have your car immediately adapted to that. For example, if your car would still have a petrol or diesel, in some cities you have these bans on these vehicles, older vehicles. It would be good to know that in advance, and actually that the vehicle does an automatic redirection. And that is being done through traffic management apps in the future, today already. What we also see is digital twins, so that a city, for example, is literally taking a copy of the physical environment in a digital format. And that is being shared with all the users of that traffic space, I would say, so that a kind of orchestration role. And that is what we want to do with ERTICO and the TM 2.0, the Traffic Management 2.0 platform, is the mobility management, the management of traffic, and also trying to induce people to use another route or another transport mode. It should not always be your car or your bike individual use. You can have other optimized usage. We also see more and more intelligent access systems where you are allowed to use certain space on a certain moment of the day based on the intensity of traffic, based on historic profiles, but also based on AI features, of course, that we see now. And also the use of, for example, public transport can be used more and more as captation of the outside environment. So they put radars, sensors, cameras, without violating privacy, of course, but at least you have metadata. You have data on how empty or how full is the bus and the street. It's just very easy example. Transport for London is doing that with some, actually one OEM is very active, a big brand who is providing data to these public transport operators and the other way around, so that each can orchestrate the best use of their transport medium. So I think there's so much to do in that area, so much low-hanging fruit, and that's why ERTICO is really involved in all this, in this digital economy as well, of course.
We have talked about autonomous mobility, robotaxis, urban air mobility, even automated valet parking, MaaS, traffic management. When I look at all these ones, they have one common thing, that they are now using some features from AI in all these areas. And what I wonder is, what excites you most about the artificial intelligence role in transport?
I think we just finalized a big paper on artificial intelligence for the European Commission in terms of what is the role of AI in transport and mobility. Transport and mobility, the feature is that you can use a lot of data coming from your products, public and private. A car produces a lot of data without you realizing it. The same for other, like say, traffic lights or the roads even. They are more and more digitized in terms of equipment and data. So if we would have the right data sets and good quality data, and if these data would be refreshed at a very regular pace, so it should be real-time data for some applications, if then you launch AI on that, so which is not machine learning, much more advanced, Gen AI, for example, you would be much better off. You would be much better off in terms of quick decision-making based on AI processing, and also more transparent and more productivity. Instead of having a computer going through the data that you put in, AI will do it itself. We see AI being used in traffic management, as we just discussed, traffic control centers. When we talked about ITS World Congress, I was really fascinated by the traffic control center, the management center of Dubai, from RTA, the Road Transport Authority. It was full AI enabled. They literally can predict more or less how much traffic will come in the city or in a certain area. And with AI, they can redirect certain traffic streams. So if you can do that for vehicles and for bikes and others, you could do it for other things as well in traffic. So this is definitely one of the killer applications, traffic management, traffic control on AI. We see a lot of AI also being used in manufacturing. That's something we have not touched upon here. Automotive manufacturing of other hardware and software as well. AI is being used for that. We see it also in other segments, such as, now I can give you half an hour lecture on this, but there's really
maintenance certainly,
definitely.
Or, for example, it's a good example. Just I always give in Singapore, there is a bus depot if I'm not wrong, the name of the bus depot is Ulupandan bus depot.
Yes.
There is no person, there is no staff in the bus depot. It's fully running without the staff. It's utilizing a lot from the artificial intelligence.
Yeah. There are some backsides on all this, because everybody dreams about technology will save the world and will do it all automatically and autonomously. There are some backdoors. We need to have good quality of data, because AI can only work with data that you put in the system. At this stage, at least. So the data should be of good quality, should be authoritative, meaning somebody should say this is good to go, especially if it's to steer traffic and have decisions based on that. If it's AI for comfort services, okay, fine, you have less or more comfort with this. But if it's for safety and traffic throughput and all these, and public transport and so on, you'd better have good quality before you make a decision based on AI. So that's one. The second big challenge we still have is the explainability, the transparency of these algorithms towards the user. People are a bit hesitant, and some manufacturers as well, to use AI in their production line and the service line. So that's another thing that indeed with the Commission we are looking at with the new AI Act in Europe. Another one is privacy and data protection, which goes hand in hand with the other point that I mentioned. These are all things we work on. I'm quite proud in Europe to have the AI Act, which is an overall forward-looking act. It's not regulating technology, but it's really regulating processes and some European values, such as transparency, protection of the European freedom as well, and also explainability of AI, something we do not yet see in other regions of the world on the regulatory front, and that is hopeful to start this discussion.
Joost, thank you for sharing your insights with us today. Is there anything else you would like to highlight before we conclude?
That's a difficult question, Kaan. I love these things. I like to learn more from other industries as well. We are going through a massive transformation on manufacturing, on geopolitical, geo-industrial transformation, digital, automation, etc. But I'm sure other industries went through different cycles as well. I come from telecoms. I've seen massive shifts in that industry. Probably we have others in the chemicals, I don't know. And it would be good to have a podcast with you on these commonalities with other groundbreaking changes.
Why not? It can be good. Maybe we can even organize some sort of a roundtable, bringing together different people from transport and other industries to discuss about this commonalities. Joost, it was great and pleasure having you on the podcast, Joost. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you, Kaan. Good luck. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Mobility Redefined, brought to you by Modaxo. For more insights, visit our website at mobilityredefined.com or follow us on LinkedIn. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite app to stay updated with our latest episodes. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope you enjoyed the conversation.